Hello there, my zealots. This is Joshua coming at you today. Hey, how you doing? So a good friend of mine, Aren, asks some really interesting questions, and this is something that we have to constantly be diligent of. And I'm going to share with you his questions real quickly, and then I'll go over my answers. So his two questions are, first off, he says, and it says right here, it says, then he said unto me, say it to Thomas, reach here your finger and see my hands, reach here your hand and put it into my side, and do not be unbelieving but believing. And then he says, Thomas answered and said to him, my Lord and my God. Okay, now Aren asks me directly after they said, why did Thomas say my Lord and my God? Now, that's the first question. Now, the answer to both these questions is very similar, but I'm going to go back to this one in just a second. So that's the first question. The second question he asks, if I had a concubine, the law saying that I must be a husband of one wife, would not it be broken if a concubine is like a girlfriend, right? And he's saying, like, if I have a girlfriend, I'm not breaking the law saying I can have the husband of one wife. So, and I know it's weird. These seem like two very different questions. And how can I say that the same response is basically similar to both of these questions? Well, the thing is, you have to understand what biblical canon is. Once you understand what biblical canon is, then you know what is the Word of God and what isn't. And these answers can be answered very easily when you understand the true nature of biblical canon. So when it talks about Thomas saying, I want to put my finger into your hole in your wrist and put my hand into your side, and he says, oh, my Lord, my God. What book is that from? Well, that book is from the Gospel of John. Now, we know that in order for a gospel to be of God, it must be a fulfillment of the prophecy of the Tzemach. Okay, the prophecy of the Tzemach is the gospel, the prophecy of the king, the prophecy of the priest king, and the prophecy of the priest. For the Old Testament, and then, so those are the three main ones, right? There are two others, which is the 7 eyes upon a stone and the 7 women taking hold of one man. 7 eyes upon a stone is Revelations, and the last one has not yet been made. But we know that because of these ones, that John is not prophesied in the scriptures. It's not meant to be in the Word of God. So any argument that's supposed to support something and it comes from a specific book that is not biblical canon can't be used to defend your belief. It just can't be. And since the Gospel of John was added by men, it's definitely that any argument that would support a Trinitarian argument would not be valid. So therefore, we can just outright say, well, that doesn't apply anymore because it's not a biblical canon. It's not from God. It's not a directly God-inspired gospel. Going on to his other verse, where it talks about a bishop must be blameless, the husband of one wife. And he's saying, hey, if I have a concubine, then I can have more than one wife. I'm like, no. First off, we have to understand, how do we know it's an epistle is of God or not? Well, it talks about the brother Zebedee, and the Zebedee's brothers come up to Jesus and says, can one be on our left side, one on your right? And he's like, that's not for me to give it. It's my Father which is in heaven. It's for him to give. There's supposed to be a right hand anointed and a left hand anointed. The right hand anointed writes books and the left hand anointed writes books. If it's not written by the right or the left hand anointed, then it's not of God. Well, what is the right hand anointed? The right hand anointed is Paul. Now, who wrote Timothy? It's not Paul. Paul didn't write Timothy. So, who wrote Timothy? See, like, if we look up on here, non-canon epistles. Ephesians, 2 Thessalonians, Timothy, 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, Titus, Hebrews, James, Peter, John, Jude. All those books, not of God. Okay, so we can take that, now that we know that it has to be written by Paul, and if it's not written by Paul, we just toss it. So now there are other ways around these arguments. I mean, if you believe those scriptures to be of God, there are still other arguments that can completely invalidate them. But I'm going to tell you this, don't waste your time. There is ways to do it, and I've done this way in the past because I believe those books to be relevant for a very, very long time. I mean, the difference between Heis and Mia when it comes to the husband of one wife, it says the husband of Mia wife, and Mia can be first. It usually references being first, so at least one wife is a better trans. The point is not. It doesn't apply because it's not biblical canon. Just nip it in the bud. Get it out of here. Know your canon And a lot of your questions will be answered, because then you can look at the book and say, hey, this book supports this concept. Is that actually part of biblical canon? If it's not, then you just throw out the whole thing and you don't even have to worry about it. Anyway, the importance of biblical canon is super important, and I'm going to go over them. I'm going to quote them real quickly here. So we have the books that are in biblical canon is right over here. I don't know if you can see it. My head is in the way. But it's okay, so the books that aren't, let's just do it the other way. The books that are not biblical canon, because it's far easier to remember. It is the Hamesh Megilliot, which includes Song of Solomon, Ruth, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes, and Esther. Not of God. Those books are not of God, period. The Gospel of John, not of God. And then we have the non-canon epistles. And I'm going to go over them one last time. And it says Ephesians, 2 Thessalonians, 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, Titus, Hebrews, James, Peter, 1 Peter, 2 Peter, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, and Jude. If your biblical arguments stem from any of these books, throw it out, because it's not relevant. It's not a relevant verse. Anyway, I just wanted to bring this to your attention, because there's a lot of Christians out there, and myself included, which have these preconceived ideas of what's, I believe something to be true, and then found out much later that I'm like, oh, that actually didn't happen. Like, one of the things that I've always believed was when it talks about John going to this wedding ceremony, or not John, Jesus going to a wedding ceremony. And his mother comes up and he says, if you want more wine, ask Jesus, and do whatever he bids you do. And they come up and he says, bring me vessels of water. And he blesses the vessels and they all turn into wine. And you're like, this is wine, good stuff, blah, blah, blah. Well, when you do the research, you find out this book is only in John, and it's nowhere in the other Gospels, which is written that are prophesied. There's no reference to it at all in any of those other Gospels. So we know that it is not of God. Okay, and so we have to double check and triple check everything that we think we know about the Scriptures. Because if we don't remember, what we've been taught is what we've been taught, and we rely on these things, but we have to constantly be double checking ourselves. Is that fit with the Word of God? Is that actually part of what the Scriptures say? When we do this and we actively seek and we actively strive to understand what the true Word of God is, when we double check ourselves, I'm like, okay, I believed this for so long. Where is this actually in the Bible? And when you truly understand what the biblical canon is, you can go back and you say, oh, this verse, that's actually in a book that has no relevance anymore, because I now know what true biblical canon is. I'm just putting this out there. And it's a common misconception that keeps popping up in Christianity over and over and over and over again. And I will keep repeating this concept ad nauseum. As long as people are able to hear it, it needs to be heard. It needs to be said. So make sure that we truly understand what canon is. I'm going to put in the description a list of all the books that are not and are canon, so that way you can look it up yourself and study it. And if you have any particular questions about biblical canon, ask me. Bring it up. I'll make a video about it, and that way everybody's on the same page. Do the work, because this is what this is. This whole thing that started up in here, this is all my biblical canon research. I did the work. I'm expecting you to, and if you don't want to do the work, fine, but I expect you to do a little bit of the work, okay? Just do the research. Find out what is and is not of God, okay? It's Old Testament it's Old Testament canon if Jesus Christ quotes from the book. It's a gospel if it fulfills one of the prophecies of the Tzemach. The 5 prophecies of the Tzemach. It is a righteous epistle if it's written by either the right or the left hand anointed. So I just wanted to share that with you. Bring that to your attention so that way we're all on the same page. If you have questions, it's okay to ask questions, and it's good to be reminded. Ask a question. Find out if it does fit with the canon, if it is part of the Word of God. And if it is, then we'll get into more detail about it. But if it comes up and it's like, oh, it's not a canonical source, then we're just going to nip it in the bud and say, move on. Anyway, I love God because I love virtue, justice, and salvation. Please click, share, subscribe, click the dingy thingy so that way you know that another video is being posted. I'm definitely going to try to post more often. I'm going to try and answer all your questions. I'm also going to try and do a recap of the Saturdays that we have. We have live stream at Saturdays, 10 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. be there or be square. If you have questions, show up on 10 o'clock Saturday morning, and I'll try and answer every single one of them, because that's kind of what I do. Anyway, you know you have a blessed day. You know I love God because I love virtue, justice, and salvation. You guys take it easy. Peace, love, and grooviness. Bye-bye.